Hi, my name is Hamide Abol. I'm here today to show you how to make collage art. Before I get started, I would like to acknowledge that plastic art operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of Coquitlam First Nation. So for today, I would like to get started by showing you the materials needed to make this collage art. A pair of scissors is your best friend, but it's not definitely necessary. Glue stick is what I commonly use to make the first round of my art. You can always use other mediums to make your work fixated on the paper or any other surface, but glue stick works just as fine as any other advanced material. Also regular tape. Sometimes when I'm unsure about the placement of every element in my artwork, I just use a normal tape to make them appear where they are supposed to appear. And of course, pieces of paper and an inspiration. For today's lesson, I'm using a painting by Vincent van Gogh, a French artist. Of course, you can use your own inspiration or your own drawing for this work. I have chosen this image because it has very visual and vivid colors and elements that are easy to trace. I'm going to show you a very simple way to trace the elements of this masterpiece. If you're really good at drawing, you can obviously put this in front of you and draw the images on a piece of paper. But if you don't want to get involved with the drawings aspect of this work and jump into the collage part, which is something that I often do, you can trace the elements. You can use a Sharpie because it's easy to see. Let's get started. The elements that I'm going to choose today from this painting is the bed because it has vivid yellow colors, the blue on the wall, the window, and the table. Let's see how they go together. I start tracing the bed using my Sharpie, and these are the pieces that I'm actually going to use in my collage art. You do not have to get involved with the details of the work. You can just trace all around the elements. And that's how I trace the rest of the objects that I want to show in my collage. Here is a finished traced patterns. So I have selected the walls, the table. Just for fun, I've added the chair and the bed. To get started, I suggest using the biggest element of the work for the placement of your work. So the next step is to transfer this traced artwork into a piece of paper. You could choose any type of paper for this work. You can choose a cardboard, you can choose canvas, or just a simple letter size paper. Sometimes it's difficult to see and trace from the actual artwork with a regular cardboard. That's where I suggest using a tracing paper. For today's workshop, for simplicity, I'm going to use a tracing paper. To get started, I first trace the biggest element of the artwork, which is the bedroom. The other elements such as bed, window, table, and chair are the elements that will be added on top of everything else. The good thing about the collage art is you can always layer the papers. So you can start with the biggest parts of the painting or your artwork and then add on other elements to them. So I start by tracing the frame of my artwork, which is the bedroom. And you can see that I'm using dotted lines where there are objects that will be overlapping my artwork. This is just to give me a visual guideline of where everything starts and ends. And you can assign a frame to your work. You could do that with a ruler or just by hand. For now, I'm making some marks to show where my artwork ends. Could also use some dotted lines if that's not clear. So if I remove the painting from underneath, this is the area that I will be looking to fill in with my collage papers. Also, for simplicity and selecting the colors, you can write on them what colors are they going to be. If I want to follow exactly the way Vincent van Gogh has done the work, I can do the same colors. Of course, this is an artwork and it depends on the creativity of the creators. So you can add any colors that you want. You could go dark blue, you can go purple, or you could go any different color for the ground part. So it's totally up to you to choose and combine these colors together. But for today, I'm sticking with the colors that Master chose. Once I have identified the frame for my artwork, now I can choose the elements that I want to put on top of it. Again, I can use tracing paper for this purpose. And it's really easy and flexible to work with this paper because you can easily see the frame where you're going to work and trace. So I'm going to trace every single element that I want to have in my artwork. And I will repeat this process for a few other pieces that I want to put in my collage. So as you can see, I have traced and cut around all these elements that are going to be part of my artwork. You can also, for simplicity, put the colors that you want to consider for them, because later on, when you're about to choose the colors from the magazines or papers, it will help you identify the range of colors that you will select. I've put orange/yellow for this bed. I will put green here for the window. I'll put orange/red for the table. I'll put yellow/green for the chair. As you can see, there are some other elements on the bed that are different color. I'm very interested to also do some details for this artwork just because it makes it more interesting. So I will independently trace the pillows and the duvets that seem to be very bright red color. Keep in mind, you can go as detailed as you want with this artwork. You can trace every single element that Vincent van Gogh has painted. Or you could simplify it. But for today, I'm choosing some specific elements because I think it's a good way to demonstrate how the colors would go together. So once I remove the artwork, you will see different elements that are part of this. Now I get started and cut around these detailed elements that I just chose to do collage with. Once again, you do not have to follow the exact shape that is in the painting. You can create your own shape. But for today, we just follow exactly as they are in this artwork. Once you get comfortable with the shapes and the colors, you can choose slightly different sizes, maybe bigger pillows, or maybe a different duvet color. It's totally up to you and your creativity and how you connect with the colors. So here I have all the elements that I'm about to cut with colored paper on my page. So I actually know how the work is going to look like. Now is a really good time to add any other elements that you want. If you're interested to add more details, for example, you could add the towel, or you could add some of the paintings that are here, or the second chair, or even some details on the floor. You can see that he has put some cracks or has identified some wood colors into his painting. So you can go as detailed as you want to make this a very sophisticated collage. But you could also stay at a very high level and simple to just show the relationship between the simple forms and the colors, just like we're doing today. So to find the colors that you're interested to use in your artwork, you can look through different magazines. And I really don't have a preference for the type of magazines that I choose normally. Fashion magazines tend to have lots of editorial photos that are really of high quality. But for my own work, sometimes because I look for subtlety in the colors, I also choose really old magazines like National Geographic, and you can buy them in thrift stores. Or you can even use newspapers where they have colorful ads. I actually use everything. Once you're comfortable with paper, you can actually graduate from paper and use other objects in your artwork. You could use fabric, old clothes, or pretty much anything. So I'm looking for a few different colors in my artwork that I identified, and red is one of them. So I normally, without paying too much attention to the image itself, just look for a part of the page that has that color, because you can always glue the pieces together. And even if you don't have the perfect color, you can always create that impression, putting similar colors next to each other. And you do not have to use scissors for this stage because we're actually going to cut exactly as we need out of the spaces. I'm looking for some pink color. Use this. You could pretty much choose any types of paper or any types of colors that you want. I spent quite a bit of time going through the magazines and get inspired by different colors. And once I've done my selection, it's time to choose the perfect colors that would go with my artwork. And this is a part that I encourage you to have fun and look through, and don't hesitate to cut more than you need, because you can always recycle these papers for future artworks. So go ahead and select a whole bunch of pictures, images with interesting colors in them. So I have selected a range of different colors that I identified that were needed for my artwork. I have a few different types of blues. I have greens. I have some yellows and some texture that look like wood. I actually have found in a home magazine some actual images of wood that I thought maybe I would be able to use, maybe not. I have some red and I have some pink. As you can see, you cannot always find one page, one solid color that will exactly be the color that you're looking for. You can always like combine textures and create that feeling of the specific pink or purple or blue that you're looking for. So for now, I feel like I have enough color to get started on my project. So to get started, I will choose the biggest elements of my artwork, which is the room itself. So I have 3 different blues that I like to choose and then one floor that is all pink. So what I do here is I put the traced paper on top of my images to see if I have enough amount of blue that I'm looking for. It seems like I have quite a bit of blue from this image. So I'm about to just go and cut around this certain section. If you feel like it's too difficult to cut it freehand like I just did, you can always fix the tracing paper to the image that you have selected with tape and then repeat what I just did. So I will go ahead and trace every single piece. Even though I have different blues that I have selected for this artwork, sometimes one image is just enough. And it is totally okay that you have a variety of colors and textures in one image. Actually, this is what makes it very interesting. Some people prefer to just go with solid blue. I often combine and mix and match colors, and it's actually interesting for me to see a little bit of a different side to the story. So it's like fabric is showing. So it brings up what you prefer to do with your artwork and your personality. So I'm missing the floor and I have a few choices here. I quite like this image, even though I don't seem to have enough pink. I can go ahead and combine 2 pieces together. So for simplicity here, I'm going to put a little mark around where I'm going to cut. And then this little part that I couldn't fit quite as well on top, I'm going to trace here. And make sure to leave a little bit of an extra room because the pieces are going to overlap. It seems like all my elements are ready to be attached to my paper. So in order to glue these pieces, you can flip them and just use the glue stick, all around. I'm going to repeat this for all these other pieces in the background. As you can see, if you glue them really well together, it doesn't really show if you have any seams. And it's not very important in the final artwork because the whole purpose for this is to be a collage and it's different from a painting. Once my background is finished, now I can spend some time cutting the small pieces, which will be a little bit more time consuming than the bigger pieces. But that's part of the process and it's what's going to make your work very detailed and create a great narrative. So looking at my image, I like to add some more details to this just to make it a little bit more interesting and more volume. So it seems like there's a pole here on the bed that I like to add. Maybe I like to choose a different color just to differentiate between the frame. So in this final stage, you can take any of the leftover materials that you have and basically cut out pieces that you think it will augment the quality of your work. So here's my final work. So you can glue everything to the page once you're happy with the position of it. And you can put also a white frame around it if you like to have a better perspective on the image. But basically, this is the base of the collage, and you can always add different elements. As you can see, the image has some towels, some more frames, some details, and on the floor you can also add some textures. I hope you have enjoyed the session today, and feel free to experiment with the colors and the forms, and don't forget to have fun with it. Thank you.